Hello, and welcome to our first reel, or maybe our second reel video. And this one's going to provide an overview of marketing. I'm going to talk about two topics in this discussion. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to provide a definition of marketing, and then we will spend probably the majority of time talking about what is known as the marketing macro environment, or those factors that influence an organization's behavior, but over which an organization has no control. And as we will learn, these macro environmental factors have important implications for marketing. So, for example, one of the macro environmental factors that we will talk about economic, or the economy. And obviously, when an economy, or when people have a lot of money, that certainly has implications for marketing. So again, we'll talk about the definition of marketing, or a definition of marketing, and then we will talk about the marketing macro environment. So definition of marketing is, and I will read it from the book, and there's a nice figure that accompanies the definition of marketing in the book. And the definition of marketing says that marketing is the activity, set of institutions and processes for creating, capturing, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. So again, marketing is the activity, set of institutions and processes for creating, capturing, communicating, and delivering and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on in that definition, and that definition is very, very different than the definition when I first, when I took my first Principles of Marketing course a long time ago, which was basically in the spring of 1978. So, yeah. Yepper, or excuse me, spring of 1977. Hey, give myself a little too much credit there. So one of the things that the definition talks about is that marketing creates value, and you might be a little perplexed as to what that means. And value simply is the idea that the benefits of a certain, let's say, process exceed the cost associated with that product. So basically, when we talk about value in this context, we're talking about the benefits exceeding the cost. And an example that I like to use is Chipotle. Now, I recognize that Chipotle has had some problems in the last couple of years, but if you think about and I think probably a lot of you, if not all of you, have been to a Chipotle, and I know that when I've gone into Chipotle, sometimes I'll be standing in line for 15 minutes. Now, why would I wait in line 15 minutes when I could go down the street and get some tacos at Taco Bell, for example? And part of the reason, I think, is because of the kind of the value that Chipotle provides. And there's a number of different ways that Chipotle provides value. One of which is that if you think about it, my go-to is I get a burrito bowl when I go to Chipotle. I can tell them that I want white rice, and I can ask them for an extra scoop or two of white rice. And the same thing with the fajita vegetables, right? And so one way that Chipotle adds value to the equation, and we're not saying that Chipotle is inexpensive, right? We're not saying that at all, right? But right, the fact that I can see what's being made and I can actively contribute to what is being made from my burrito bowl is something that provides value, in the sense that the benefits that I'm getting from the burrito bowl exceed the $7.25, because I get chicken in my burrito bowl. Right. The definition of marketing also talks about satisfying needs and wants. And one of the key things with needs and wants is to understand that these things change through time. And they generally become, the needs and the wants generally become more demanding through time. And so, I think about when I first got into, for example, when I first got into teaching college students, which was the fall of 1980, right? The only way you could get in contact with me, this is the honest God truth, the only way that you could get into contact with me, because I was a graduate student and I wasn't a real professor. I did have my own classes, but I was a doctoral student. uh, you had to call a number. There was a switchboard operator at the number, and the switchboard operator worked between 8 and 4:30, which meant that if you called before 8 o'clock or if you called after 4:30, you weren't going to get the switchboard operator. And the switchboard operator, excuse me, not switchblade, but switchboard, the switchboard operator would take a message, right, write it on a piece of paper, and you go, where the hell are the answering machines? Well, answering machines were, think of where we are now, right? Perhaps you're going to send me an email, or you're going to send me a text, and you're going to expect basically an instantaneous response, right? And so when we talk about satisfying needs and wants, right, one of the key things for organizations to understand is that needs and wants change through time, and they continue to increase, right? Another really good example of this is the fact that in a number of markets, Amazon is guaranteeing 1-hour delivery. Think about that. You're placing an order, and Amazon's going to be able to bring that order to you in 1 hour. Not a day, not a week, 1 hour. All right. The definition of marketing also indicates that marketing entails an exchange, right? Here's an example, right? You need 3 credits. You pay John Carroll tuition. I give you insights on Marketing 301, and hopefully you earn 3 credits. There's an exchange. I have something to offer. You have something to offer. We exchange, and we've agreed that I think it's $725 a credit hour. So for 3 credit hours, you're paying $2,175, and I've agreed to teach the course for not $2,175, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm teaching the course for. The figure or exhibit 1.1 also talks about the product, place, price, and promotion, the 4 P's of marketing, right? The so-called marketing mix. And that's, if you look at the syllabus, that's kind of how this course is going to be structured for the most part. We're going to spend a majority of time talking about price, product, place, and promotion. And what marketers are trying to do is put together the correct blend of product, place, price, and promotion in order to differentiate one's company from competitors. And then a final thing in Exhibit 1.1 refers to performed by individuals and organizations. Organizations do marketing and individuals do marketing. And so, some of you might be, many of you are business majors. A number of you have probably had multiple BPD courses. And one of the things the BPD course is trying to do, or will do going forward, is help you to build your brand, right? Your personal brand. Why should an organization, when you graduate from John Carroll, why should an organization hire you? And part of what you're trying to do is you're trying to differentiate yourself from other people. And part of what that involves is, right, marketing yourself slightly differently than somebody else. All right, so we've talked we've provided an overview of at least the definition of marketing, and now what we'll spend the rest of the time talking about is the marketing macro environment, right? And again, the macro environment are factors that influence an organization's behavior, but they are factors that an organization does not control, does not influence. Your book has a really unwieldy acronym, CD-STEP, C-D-S-T-E-P. I hate that acronym. It's awful. I much prefer the wonderful PEST, the PEST acronym, P-E-S-T, with P standing for political, E standing for economic, S standing for socioculture, and T standing for technology. And so what we'll do is we'll spend a little bit of time talking about each one of those letters, right? So the first one we're going to talk about, because pest starts with P, is we're going to talk about political. Now, in this version, P stands for both political and regulatory, and here's a very technical word, stuff, right? Political and regulatory stuff. And we live in really interesting times right now. You know, it's the middle of 2018. Mr. Trump is going crazy with tariffs and things like that. Tariffs are a political weapon, right? And tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods, right? They can really, have, can really screw up organizations in terms of, where they're going to get their products from or where people are going to buy from. And in fact, this morning, and I'm recording this on the 25th of June, I just saw that Harley Davidson is going to shift some of its production overseas because of the tariffs that are being reciprocated because Mr. Trump is putting tariffs on things coming in from certain European countries. European countries are putting tariffs on stuff coming in from the United States, like Harley Davidson motorcycles and bourbon coming out of Kentucky and things of that nature. So, the political arena is something that has a tremendous influence on organizations, but over which organizations have limited input. But as we can see, and if you've followed stuff going on, right, the stuff going on from a political perspective in the United States and other countries has profound implications for business. Just to give you another example, and then we'll move on. 2 years ago, the United Kingdom had what was known as the Brexit referendum, right, where basically the United Kingdom decided to pull out of the European Union. And we're now 2 years down the road from that, and it's still not clear as to exactly what that's going to look like, because by being part of the European Union, the United Kingdom was able to trade with other EU countries, right, and have very low tariffs and other kinds of international trade barriers, such as documentation requirements. It's really still 2 years later, in basically June, July of 2018, they still haven't hammered out. They being the United Kingdom and the European Union, they haven't hammered out exactly what that Brexit removal is going to look like. So political and regulatory stuff is P. And then E, as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, is economic. And there's just a lot of stuff that falls under the economic umbrella. So one is what's known as, if you remember from your Econ 201 and 202 courses, gross domestic product, GDP. The value of all goods and services produced in an economy in a particular period of time. That's a nice measure. What marketers often look at is something called GDP per capita, right? You take your gross domestic product and divide it by the number of people in a country, and the higher the gross domestic product per capita, right, or the lower the gross domestic product per capita, that has key implications for what marketers can do. So in a country that has high gross domestic product per capita, you're going to be able to sell more luxury type items, whereas in a country that has very low gross domestic product per capita, people are going to be concerned with survival, and so things that are considered luxuries, not so much. So one measure is gross domestic product, and then gross domestic product per capita. And as I've mentioned, right, there are all sorts of other kinds of economic considerations that have an impact on organizations. But again, individual organizations have no influence over these particular economic conditions or factors. A second that we'll talk about just briefly is inflation, right? Basically, changes in price over a period of time. And so if you think about an economy where there's really high inflation, and I think most of you are in your teens, 20s, maybe late 20s at best. You really haven't lived in an environment where there was high inflation in the United States. But when there's high inflation, marketers have a real challenge, and that is, okay, so if the inflation rate is pretty high, let's say it's 100%, basically means your prices are doubling in 1 year. The question is how regularly as a marketer should I increase my price? So things like inflation, right? Another economic consideration. A third component of PEST is the S, which refers to sociocultural considerations. And again, there's a lot of things that fall under the sociocultural um, um, umbrella, right? So, for example, one of the things is demographics, basically the descriptive profile of the residents of either a country or a particular region. And so, one of the things that's been happening in the United States and many industrialized countries is that the average age of the population is increasing. That's significant because of the fact that, spending, right, is different when people are at different points in their life. So, for example, I know I don't look it. You can tell me I don't look it. I'll be very vain about this. But in August, I will be 64. All right. And so the kinds of stuff that I'm purchasing in my mid 60s is going to be very different than the kind of stuff that I was purchasing when I was your age, right? So that's just one consideration, right? One of the things that's been happening in the United States as well is that the average age of people getting married is getting older, and that is important because what it means that has a lot of implications, right? So you're getting married older. Oftentimes, what that means is you have fewer children. That has implications. You're getting married when you're older, right? You may have more money. You may end up using wedding planners, for example. You might have I'll call it extravagant, a more extravagant wedding reception, unlike the first wedding reception I ever went to, which was literally, it was my best friend from college, and I was best man at his wedding between his junior and senior year in college. And the reception was, there were two tubs in the backyard of his bride's house, right? There were two tubs. One had beer in it, the other had soft drinks in it, and there were like two tables that had two buckets, and the one bucket had potato chips and the other bucket had pretzels. That was it. Goodbye. Let's just say when you get married older, you're probably not having that as your wedding reception stuff. All right. I've also put an article on Canvas that talks about kind of one of the switches that's going on in terms of how people consume food. Again, that's a sociocultural thing or factor that impacts how marketers approach their task. The final letter in the PEST acronym is T for technology, and that provides a really nice segue into the marketing in the 2010s discussion, which is the second discussion that we will have this semester. Uh, you know, just tremendous changes based on technology, and I've also put up an article on Canvas that talks about kind of the tension between digital marketing and data privacy, right? The fact that the more information, the more data that marketers can collect on you, the better job that marketers can do of just like, honing in on who you are and what your needs are and what your wants are and things like that. But there's a fine line between really good marketing and invading people's privacy. And just to kind of conclude this discussion, because I'm almost at 20 minutes, you probably aren't aware, but when the cell phone was first introduced back in 1984, the price of the cell phone, the product, right, the good, $3,995. did not include any sort of plan. So that's where we'll stop. We'll see you down the road. Bye.